This is the parental apathy case study for 856. In terms of what I know in this situation is really that the principal believes he's in control of everything that's going on. He believes he's communicating effectively. However, that communication has not appeared to be effective as far as the assistant principal is concerned at this point. The parents have been consistently uninvolved, according to the principal. They lack interest in volunteering, and they are unlikely to be present when they're invited to participate. The communication connection is also running through the students, which is really important to note because that's how the communication is getting to the parents. And so for parents to be actively involved, they have to be certain to get the communication from their student when they get home. I don't think that the school is performing at its peak. I think that's clear in the communication right now, and that the community relations really is probably not the principal's strongest suit. It's not necessarily what he has been trained to do. What I really need to know is what the principal has actually done to communicate with the community. How does he communicate with them? What methods go out? Does he use more than just the letters through the students? I also want to know what efforts have been made to reach out to the community by other staff members. So how do teachers communicate with parents or other employees of the school? How do they communicate with the parents? I'm curious why the principal is also opposed to having a PTA or a PTO. I like the idea of the parent advisory board, but I think it's a good idea to understand why the principal is concerned about either of the other two organizations. And then I also want to know what the parents believe when it comes to school communication. Do they believe the school has been communicating effectively? Are there things that they feel they could know more of, and how would they like that communication to be put out? And then for this case study, I think it's really important to also understand the community itself. So what kinds of jobs do the parents hold? Do they have working hours that prevent them from being involved during certain times? Are they available to volunteer during the school day, or is it just less likely that the majority of the community is going to have that opportunity? So I really want to know from them, when are they available and how are they available for helping the school? The principal problem here is honestly in the principal. I think that the principal is unwilling to take advice in an area where he needs help. And I think the other problem is that the community is not being reached in the way that they should be. And so that there need to be other methods established to have that happen. And then for the students just as a whole, the school needs to communicate better in terms of how they're reaching different people to make sure that the education of the students is at its peak. As far as my plan of action, I actually would really want to proceed with the meeting. So if I were in that position, I would tell the principal that I'd like to still interact with the 8 parents who are there. I feel like I could get a better sense of some of the things that are going on and be able to ask them questions in a very personal environment in terms of being able to communicate with those 8 people who apparently want to be involved in a way. I'd really like to look at those 8 parents specifically and ask them for their help or their ideas in terms of communicating with the greater community and finding ways that would actually reach the rest of the community better. I'd like to search for a parent volunteer to lead the parent advisory board that the principal said he was okay with. And I also want to volunteer personally to take over the communication for the school. It's obviously not something that the principal would like to do himself, and so I think being able to say I'd like to take this on as part of my responsibilities would take some pressure off of the principal, but also enact some policies or some changes that would be effective for the school. And then I also want to implement a plan of action for communication with the parents in the community based on the responses that I would get. As far as implementing these strategies, I would proceed with the meeting as planned and use it as a chance to gain insights from the people who are currently present. I also want to create a survey to be sent home, so making use of something like SurveyMonkey to be able to ask the parents information about their lifestyles, about their preferences for communication, and the needs that they have as parents. As far as the school budget is concerned, I do think that there's a need to create some incentive for the parents to get involved, and so I would strongly consider doing something that helps incentivize responses for the survey. Something that's also going to create some sort of community feel. So really not wasting that incentive, but using it to help establish a little bit more of a positive interaction between school, parent, community. Based on the data from the survey that I would send out, I would want to implement a plan of action for communication. There would be multiple multiple methods or modes of communication, and I think that the survey just really has to establish what the best ones are. If it's social media, if it's a consistent newsletter, if it's updates on the website, but I just think it really needs to be something that's clear for the parents to understand how they're going to be communicated with and where they need to be looking for that communication. And then once I get that plan set in place, I really want to establish an implementation plan for community news with the families. It's something that I'd want to work on with the rest of the staff just to figure out what sorts of things need to be communicated, how frequently we need to communicate, and then really develop that so that the parents know when to expect the communication from the school. And then I also want to establish meetings for the parent advisory committee. So as long as we're able to get a good base of volunteers for that, I'd want to establish at least a regular monthly meeting where we're working together to establish interactions between the parents and the school. As far as what's best for students, I think it's very obvious that a strong parent-school relationship is going to help the students perform at a higher level. Parents and teachers communicating together really is going to identify the needs of the students. I think it's also important to take the students out of being a middleman in this situation. Currently, they're the ones who are having to bring home the communication and potentially bring back the communication from the parents as well. And I think it's important that the students simply focus on being students. I also think it's important for those students to have extra support, and so communication is going to really establish those opportunities. As far as the data to support this, the parents really need to be a part of the community but haven't recently been invited or haven't been invited properly. The principal is basing his decisions right now off of limited conversations through conferences and his own sentiment over the past few years. I think it's important that the invitation the invitation was sent through a note with the students rather than a direct line to the parents. I'm not always one to believe that the notes always get home with the students. I think some students do, but I think it's more personal when that note actually gets home directly to the parents, not through the students, but in another method. And I also think that the case study shows that the principal definitely has a preconceived notion, but he also lacks understanding of communication strategies. Something altered his perspective, but he's kind of unwilling to change that in his mind. As far as what I was thinking during this, I really focused in on how the principal seems to lack knowledge of how to connect to the community. He has a pre-established problem right now with the parents being uninvolved and has done very little to remedy it. And so I was really thinking about how it was going to be tough to change it, but that it can be changed. And then I also think that it's really important that the assistant principal take over this aspect of school leadership. And I also really do believe that the community needs to be better connected. My feelings with this were definitely rooted around frustration and concern. I think the frustration is definitely there with the principal's lack of willingness. He seems unwilling to figure out a different way or to problem solve a solution. But I do have concern too for the assistant principal in terms of confronting the principal. It's tough to stand up to your superior, to your boss, but I think it's important that the assistant principal does so in this situation. And then I also felt annoyance just from the parents' perspective, because if I had a student in the school, I really would be frustrated with the way that the school is communicating and not really working to make it something that functions in a 21st century world. And as far as my values, I really wanted to value the assistant principal's new knowledge and her ability to establish a different practice. I valued what she brings to the table, and I think I also valued the parents receive communication and that their right to be involved in the educational process has to be honored. I also really want to value that different communication styles can help create accessible channels of communication to improve the school, and that student success is also just enhanced when the parents are involved and able to communicate effectively with the school. I think there's still a few issues left to be resolved. I think one is to how do I proceed with the parent group? So what role are they going to play, and what is the principal willing to let them do as far as the school is concerned? I also think it's important to resolve the principal's role in communication and the information he needs in order to improve his ability to communicate effectively with the school. Just because I want to take over as the assistant principal does not mean that he should be completely exempt from participating in this. And then I also want to really resolve the best method to get parents to respond to the informational survey. So what's going to get them to buy in and want to respond and be a part of this process? And then I think the last issue that is really important is what opportunities can we create at the school to get the parents volunteering there or involved in what we're doing. And so what are some of those components that the rest of the school faculty can help me figure out to make sure that the parents are valued? It's important to note that the success of every student in this situation is a little bit interesting because it's about the parent involvement. But right now, I think for students to be successful, their parents really need to be a key player in this. And right now, not all parents are being reached. And that means that not all students are being supported fully. So by communicating more effectively with the parents and really getting them involved and understanding how to interact with the school, it's going to help the opportunities that the parents have to better support the students at home or in the programs they're doing at the school. I think the more parents that are involved, the stronger the school can get, and they'll have more positive interactions and more information in terms of how to better reach the students. I think parent volunteers can also help spread school resources so that teachers and other faculty members aren't tapped too much, and then we can operate in a way that's a little bit more efficient. The student well-being is really important. I think it's very important communication-wise to be able to highlight some of the successes of the students. But as we look at it too, it's also the mental health. The parents have a direct line and understanding as to how the students are mentally at home. And I think opening that door for communication back and forth is going to ensure their well-being at school. I think parent volunteers can also help with programming to create opportunities for events or different lessons or educational outreach for the parents so that teachers and administrators aren't necessarily having to do extended time after school and can focus more on the educational component. Then I also think communication can highlight the student success. I think that can raise the morale of the school and create a stronger community component. And then the communication can also create links between the students and school. While we're focusing on parental apathy, I think it's also important that the students know that they can use these channels for communication as well. And then the community engagement, I think through doing this, the parent advisory board can really extend communication in a way that helps the parents and the community understand what's going on in and around the school. I think there's going to be more communication posted in various ways, which will ultimately reach more people. And I think it's going to be an easy way to invite the community to interact with the school, to be a part of programs and events like restaurant nights or fundraising where the community can really help out, even if they don't have a kid in the school. I also think that these volunteer roles that we're working on creating is going to make the parents feel more valued and a part of this actual community, and that the community is going to be providing school support in whatever means they potentially can. I think overall, in terms of looking at parental apathy, it's a situation that is going to have to be changed, and that change might take a little while. But with the right tools, with the right understanding, I think that the assistant principal is going to be able to make a lot of gains in changing the feel of the community in this situation.